I don't know how to, okay, there I am. And everybody, is everybody seeing a slideshow popping up here?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So I, I reviewed the active transportation guide that the TAC has been working on, and to try and help kind of get some context. And I thought the best place to start was with these questions that Otis, you sort of provided for some context for us. And the question that you're working with is, can e-bikes share spaces with regular bikes? And what is it like to share these spaces? Thinking about shared facilities and safety, and then kind of just wondering where the conversation is nationally with regards to some of these regulations and speed limits of e-bikes. So with with that context in mind, and with those questions sort of at your forefront, I wanted to just quick kind of do like a e-bike 101 overview of just some basic kind of terms and concepts and things. And so some of this may be familiar to some, and others maybe have never, aren't as familiar with e-bikes, but I thought I'd start there because I think it helps to frame the questions around regulations and how to plan for e-bikes as part of the transportation system moving forward. So the basic thing to keep in mind is that e-bikes, and this seems to be a pretty universal way of classifying e-bikes, is separating it into these three different classes. And the differences between them have to do with whether or not they're pedal assist or have a throttle, meaning that there's you don't have to pedal in order to move. You can just push on the throttle, either as a might be like a twist throttle like on a motorcycle, or sometimes it's just like a button that you push. So it's that's one of the major classifying factors. And the other one is when the power assist cuts off, and whether or not that's 20 miles per hour or 28 miles per hour. All across all of these three classes, they have the same maximum power limitations. So anything beyond that, it would not, be considered a e-bike, but instead a motorized vehicle. So all of these came about from, and on the Vermont side, e-bikes were classified as non-motorized vehicles, so long as they sort of adhere to these criteria. The main difference is that with class 3 is that the pedal assist, or the power assist, allows you to go to a faster speed. That's not to say that you can't go faster than 20 miles per hour on a class 1. It's just that you won't get that pedal assist, electric assist, that you get if you're going at slower speeds. And then class 2 being the only one that has a throttle component to it. So all of these classes, though, under Vermont regulations, are considered non-motorized vehicles. And what that means, and this is from, I think, July of 2021 is when this went into effect, that this legislation and the state level, e-bikes are not considered motorized vehicles. They are not subject, therefore, to registration, inspection, license, all of the things that go with motorized vehicles like a car or a motorcycle. But that's so long as they have fully operable pedals, and then therefore they are governed as bicycles under Vermont law, and so they have to follow those same rules as bicycles would. And also, and this is, I think, important for some of those planning questions, is that the operators are considered vulnerable users then, in the same way that bicyclists or pedestrians will. Also included in this regulations, municipalities are allowed to set their own speed limits then. So even though they statewide bicycles or e-bikes are regulated as bicycles, there's still speed limits that can be adjusted at the municipal level. Any questions about that? I know that kind of covers the basic sort of regulatory environment where e-bikes stand. Effectively, they are understood at the state level as bicycles, and so that kind of limits the ability of the things that can be done to regulate them at the local level. And I think that, I'm a proponent of e-bikes, so I think ultimately that's a good thing, to sort of frame e-bikes as more a bicycle than it is separate from that. And so I think that this was a good thing that the state did to sort of help clarify that and to set those class standards that seems pretty across the board. I mean, that's in Europe, they have these same class systems. It's very much a part of sort of the ways that e-bikes are understood and classified.
Hmm.
Do you know of any towns that have set speed limits yet?
So I don't know of any yet, but I do know that the conversation on the New Hampshire side and Lebanon is I think they have different laws as it to understand e-bikes. I'm not really quite sure what they are, but they don't have the same, I think, statewide. Is that true, Anna? I mean, I feel like that's my understanding, but you maybe have also.
It's roughly the same, though, in the way they treat the 3 different classes. I think class 3 are not allowed on multi-use paths in New Hampshire.
Yeah, that was my only kind of
Hmm.
understanding was that, but I don't know if they're sort of classified in the same way as a non-motorized vehicle as defined under Vermont statute. So I don't know.
They are.
They are. Okay. Yeah. So that I think I don't know of any, just I guess to answer your question, Otis, I do not know of any that have set speed limits. And I think Burlington did, and this gets a little bit more into the weeds, but they even went so far as with their bike share program, which is a program that allows you to pick up a bike and drive around and then drop it off in a different location. They had an e-bike. They have e-bikes for their bike share program, and they actually have it so that the pedal assist would max out at 10 miles per hour on their greenway and 15 miles an hour on other parts of the city, because they were able to monitor that based on the GPS on there that is part of their bikes for the bike share program. So I think that they've done a little bit of tweaking around, but I'm not sure on the specifics of it. Anna mentioned this briefly, but multi-use trails, they have a few differences to it, or just a couple nuances around it, and that's has to do with to the way that a lot of multi-use trails receive federal funding on these trails. And so, and then according to if they get federal funding, I think they have certain criteria that then have to follow, and the speed limit is set for 20 miles per hour, and that's for both bikes and e-bikes. But then also e-bikes are allowed on multi-use trails that receive federal funding. And this is just a picture of the Muskoma River Greenway. And I think I was on a meeting where the chief of police had been sort of tasked to think through safety concerns on the Muskoma Greenway, as well as the rail trail that extends from the Greenway. And sort of his recommendation was that monitoring speed limits was not an effective way of regulating, and in terms of kind of setting up speed traps or handing out tickets or administering fines in that way, and was much more encouraging about setting a culture of sharing the path and culture of respect. And these are some of the ways in which they're kind of doing that, just making clear what what some of the rules around it are, and then even further, you'll see on this one, announce that you're going to pass on the left, be visible, share the path, be aware, lots of things. It's sort of more kind of courtesy than it is really direct administration of any sort of fines or ticketing. And then this, I also wanted to just point out some of this connects a little bit to also, I think, the national conversation around e-bikes, because there does seem to be, I think, in some ways, a perception more so than a reality around what safety concerns exist. And I think that there's sometimes that this can get sort of blown out of proportion, but some of the concerns that come up or at least that I noticed when I was looking at some of this, is that there's concerns around the batteries and whether or not there's safety issues with that. There's been concerns from transit providers about allowing e-bike batteries on the bus, you know, similar to the ways that maybe airlines are concerned with, you know, certain types of phone batteries or laptop batteries, things like that. And the malfunctions that might go with that. But as I was looking at some of the safety concerns, some of the safety concerns are just generally also concerns for that happen on other bikes, you know, tires blowing out or bearings locking up or different failures on the wheel hubs and things like that. The ones that I think can be maybe concerns are if you have a malfunctioning throttle, because that, you know, if your throttle gets stuck or a person doesn't know how to use it, the bike will just keep going and the rider might lose control. But I think for the most part, you have to have the same type of safety that you would on a bicycle, and the risks are relatively the same, except for, I would add that, you know, e-bikes tend to be much heavier, not a lot heavier. Some of them are actually quite comparable. But for instance, I have an e-cargo bike that's 75 pounds. And so that can get going pretty fast down a hill. That can lose control quite easily. It can tip on me, especially when I have kiddos in the back. So I've got to be a lot more careful. And there are some more electronic components that, you know, could crap out on you or cause some issues that you have to be aware of. But other than that, I think that the safety concerns for e-bikes have yet to pan out in a way that I think is distinctly different from conventional bicycles. I think there are safety concerns, but I don't think that there are necessarily ones that that distinguish themselves that much from conventional bicycles. So, I mean, kind of what I'm getting at to most, then, I think from a planning perspective and the conversations that I think are really important is that what's good for conventional bikes is good for e-bikes too. And any kind of safety concerns or any concerns that people might have about, you know, e-bikes taking up space or e-bikes going too fast or anything like that, I think is more of a conversation around, well, then how do we ensure that we have appropriate overall bike infrastructure to make bicycling in general safer, to make it safer for both motorists, cyclists, pedestrians. Effectively, how do we have complete streets that allow for active transportation to take shape? So my kind of overall summary to these questions are, can e-bikes share spaces with regular bikes? I think absolutely. And what's it like to share space between these? You know, as a conventional bicyclist and as an e-bicyclist, I don't find very much difference in terms of sharing space with either. The difference is more of for the individual rider. I noticed that it's much easier for me to go up a hill on an e-bike versus a conventional bike. So, and then I think, to your point, to the focus on e-bikes for commuting, you know, is great too, because I think it really changes the landscapes for people to be able to, particularly in this location and climate, to be able to use an e-bike for commuting purposes is a great option. And the same thing for shared facilities and safety. You know, as I said, good bike infrastructure is good e-bike infrastructure. And so having the facilities that meet the needs of cyclists and the safety needs of cyclists are also going to help support e-bike riders as well. I will say that I think the conversation nationally in terms of where can they ride, you know, this is more, I think, anecdotally, or kind of just sort of as somebody who is an e-bike advocate, who has one, who works with communities. I kind of pay attention to the tenor of what the conversation is at. And I think where it is at is there's a lot of interest in conversations like this, where I think people are sort of, you know, wondering, okay, well, how do we need to change our approach to transportation planning in order to consider e-bikes, which I think is good that e-bikes are becoming a part of the conversation. I do think, as I sort of said, that some of the safety concerns and the need to sort of regulate it separately from other bikes, I think, is a little bit more about sort of educating and gaining consciousness around the efficacy and use of e-bikes and its role and its popularity and its I think future in the transportation system, more so than it is about there being a distinct difference between e-bikes and bikes and the need to kind of regulate them as separate. So I'm sort of in line with what has been passed in Vermont to sort of, you know, move e-bikes out of the category of motorized vehicles and more into the category of a conventional bicycle, and sort of to treat e-bike riders as conventional cyclists in that regard, as vulnerable users, as how they are sort of seen and interpreted in transportation planning. So yeah, that's my take for what it's worth. Happy to answer any questions, or Anna, if you feel like there's other things that maybe should covered in more depth or clarified.
No, I'm happy to move into what everybody's thoughts are.
I'm gonna
Like Diane.
stop sharing this then. There we go. Sure, Diane.
I wondered if there is any place in Vermont where steps have been taken to accommodate e-bikes. Maybe we talked a lot about Burlington. Of course, there's a lot going on in Burlington with the waterfront and the, can't remember the name of it, the organization that started Local Motion. But do you know of, or maybe Anna, you might have an answer for this too. Has anyone, we know that e-bike traffic is increasing. More people are getting interested in e-bikes, commuting for other reasons. It's cheaper, it's greener, it's got everything in its favor, except maybe in the winter, but you know, mostly it really works. So has the state, is there any place in Vermont that has already started making steps, painting these lines, you know, not just for bicycles, but for bicycles, like putting racks, you know, that would accommodate e-bikes as opposed to just bicycles, really seriously making an effort to make it easier for bicyclists to commute. Do you have an answer to that? Maybe you don't.
I know that they're having similar conversations in St. Johnsbury right now, and I don't know anything about Burlington. I'm gonna guess there. John, do you?
Oh, we know locally here in the Upper Valley, Advanced Transit is put some new bike racks on their buses to help accommodate e-bikes. They can hold heavier bikes, and they're bigger, and you know, so they're a transit provider that's sort of trying that's seeing e-bikes as an asset as part of their services to try and fit that in. So, but I could only really make an assumption, but it would maybe be that it's more on an ad hoc level, and it would be, I think, in some of these smaller ways, like having bigger bike racks would be a great way to start. But again, I think that this is a question too around just, for the most part, as long as you focus, I think, on doing good bike infrastructure, and that's across the board, whether it's bike racks or lanes, other facilities, it's, I think, going to be a benefit to e-bikers as well.
What about charging the battery?
The battery, I think, you know, I haven't really heard or seen too much about sort of shared charging spaces and whether or not they're integrating that into. I'd be curious to see if other places like Burlington are doing it. You know, I think these are good questions to consider if you're at all thinking about incorporating some kind of bike share program into the region, because those bike racks you could build in as charging stations, and so that when people check them out and check them back in, they're
Charged.
They're getting into a charger. So, you know, I mean, I don't know. It's a good question. It's been, in terms of my personal use as a e-bike rider, I haven't had too much need to have charging elsewhere. You know, because the batteries are pretty light. You can take them out and you can just plug them into a regular wall socket.
Right.
So it certainly could be useful. I'm not saying that it shouldn't be considered as an option, but I'd say it's not I don't think it should be considered a barrier to thinking of how to support e-bikes.
And the battery itself is so expensive. You'd want to probably be able to take it with you into your workspace so that you could protect it.
Yeah, the one that I have, it's got
and charge it then.
Yeah, you can take it out and make sure then it doesn't work as an e-bike if you're taking the battery out. So sort of discourages theft and things like that. Yeah.
It's also, it's just reminding me when John was reviewing the safety concerns, I feel like there's a few added ones during the winter, obviously, if you're choosing to ride in shoulder season in any way. And my understanding is that, some of those best practices involve rinsing the whole bike down with water if you're ever riding in a situation where it's going to get salt. And always bringing the battery indoors if it is not going to be stored in a place that is going to be above freezing.
Mhm.
And so I've seen some conversations about bike storage sort of revolve around that, but I think all of them have assumed that people are taking the battery with them and leaving the bike.
Right.
And so a regular or traditional, I don't know, bike rack, is the extra weight or size isn't an issue? Or is it? Should we be? I mean, I don't think we have a lot of bike parking in our region to begin with. But are people looking at sort of swapping out for more robust bike racks and things like that, or sort of what's there already? Does that work fine?
I have seen folks looking for a quick solution, just look at putting a cover over an existing, like classic, just sort of, twirl of metal. And even for a short term, I don't think this would be relevant to y'all, but when somebody needed a locked place that was also covered, they just put a tent up over their existing bike
Oh,
rack, and then it was locked and covered. But obviously that was for like a 1-month solution, so different.
Yeah, I think it's in many ways it's good to keep e-bikes in mind if you're installing new bike parking facilities, because I think this is a trend that is continuing, and also it might be a good excuse to just really assess what your bike parking is like, because I know when I'm riding around, I'm kind of surprised at how little bike parking there is where I'm biking around. And so I would like to just see more bike parking in general. But if new bike parking is needed, you might as well make it friendly for e-bikes too.
yeah.
And is that mainly, I hadn't thought about that, is that mainly having a cover for it? Is that really the big difference then?
I mean, I don't know.
Friendly?
Yeah, would be nice, I guess. Certainly would protect from the elements and things like that, but we'll see.
Do you have any idea what the growth expectation is on e-bikes?
That's an excellent question.
Yeah.
I can only tell you that I am in communication with most of the bike shops in our area, and that if you if you have a lot of money, you can get something right away, no matter what. But let's say that you are a average e-bike purchaser, you're looking at a 1 to 2 year wait, especially if you have a particular bike already in mind and are not just have a certain set of parameters that several bikes could meet. A lot of people are ordering online bikes because of that supply chain issue.
Mm-hmm. You may have heard that the Vermont, there was an e-bike rebate program that was offered alongside electric vehicle rebates, and that I think it lasted 2 weeks maybe before it ran out, I think is how long it was. So it was immensely popular.
Yeah, they used it up.
Yeah, I think at last I heard they were hoping to put a little more money into that, because I think that's about what I was getting to, a couple weeks. Yeah. Something I was curious about looking at. Oh, sorry, Diane, I'll let you go.
No, I don't mean to interrupt, but when Anna said that, if you want to order a bike, you've got to wait, is that because of supply chain disruptions or because they're so popular that the manufacturers can't get enough on the market?
I don't know. I have assumed it was both. I guess I should have asked for, disambiguation. I'm going to guess that because it was happening previously, it might have been due to COVID supply chain issues, but wouldn't have been due to more recent war-related supply chain issues. So I'm gonna guess it, like many things, is a confluence of a couple factors.
Mhm.
So what were you going to say? What?
Yeah, I guess or sort of changing the subject, so I'm glad you, I'm glad you asked that first. Was I think one of the concerns isn't maybe the right word, but one of the things I was hearing is sort of an assumption you'd make, especially in a region like ours, where commuting sort of takes place over relatively long distances, and we don't have a lot of dedicated bike infrastructure, is if people are using e-bikes more for things like commuting or even going into town to run errands and things like that, which I think we certainly hope they would for a number of reasons, they're probably going to be sharing the road with vehicles. And so I'm curious what you've heard from sort of your borrowers and people you know, or as people who ride e-bikes in general. What is that experience like driving in, or are you doing most of your biking in a travel lane with, you know, tractor trailers and trucks and cars and all that kind of stuff? And, you know, is that different from riding a traditional bike? And, or are you seeing people who aren't sort of as experienced bicyclists or then getting an e-bike for this purpose, and are they coming back a little, how comfortable is that experience, I guess, and what can you do to make that more comfortable if that is an issue?
Yeah, you kind of answered your own question there at the end. With our e-bike subsidy users, many of them had not ridden a bike in a decade, some longer. So part of the program was to provide some education on how to feel comfortable riding on the road. And then, so obviously that the question you sort of posed at the end, the education piece is really big in terms of how to feel comfortable next to a car. And then I have also heard from folks that the e-bike's ability to go faster, quicker, and to start at a stoplight, for instance, start at a stoplight, yeah, quicker, makes them feel more confident, you know, despite being on a road that maybe you wouldn't normally think they would feel comfortable riding. The winter again adds, there's less road, so people are less comfortable. I know for the folks that I talked to for whom it was their first time using an e-bike as a commuting option for a full year, they mostly just didn't ride in the winter. It's just a 3-season tool for them. Because of road comfort more than, you know, weather or anything else like maintenance of the bike. So I think it's still an issue, but it's helped by the speed and size of the bikes.
I'll agree with everything Anna said and just add hills are a big, being able to go up a hill and not have to work really hard and to be able to maintain a certain speed makes you feel a lot safer when you're tackling those hills and there's cars zooming by you. It's I think that's helpful to have an e-bike that way.
I should say that when I was hosting the e-bikes, two of the people who tried them out decided to buy, and one of them, well, both of them were negotiating a very steep hill that is just north of Windsor on Route 5 that goes past the golf course. Really scary, even twists and turns. And one person, an older person, 75 years old, said he waited until he'd look and just stop the bike, wait until traffic is done, and get on. And because he had the motor, he could zip up that, and he was done even before the traffic started up again. And then someone else who was much younger and was using the bike to commute to Heartland because she had a job in Heartland would not take Route 5. She would find other ways, you know, and that was part of the pleasure of it, she said, was that she could explore, you know, alternative routes and still not have to worry about going miles out of her way and taking a lot of time because it was quick. And so she was utterly thrilled by it. And she's going to use it all year.
That's interesting.
Yeah, that was sort of another question I'd have, is what are these, because a lot of, maybe for recreation, or I think I heard we had the planner from the Bennington County Regional Commission come and talk about e-bikes a while back, and I remember him mentioning he preferred seeking out sort of gravel roads and things like that for sort of a similar reason. So I was wondering, yeah, is that something you're hearing? Is that people are seeking out gravel routes instead, or is that just, you know, opens up more options like that?
I'm surprised how many fat tire bikes I've seen around. You know, the e-bikes that have the fatter tires, and I would just make an assumption that that's for to have a little bit more, you know, stronger hold on more difficult terrain or to handle different weather situations. So that's what I've noticed.
Yeah, and I have seen a whole range of folks who just get right on the road and feel comfortable doing that, and folks who intentionally have learned new commutes to work. Also note that for some people, this is their only transportation option, and so they will ride it up to Barry, you know, or up to St. Johnsbury, because that is the way that they can get to where they need to go. And so in that case, they're finding all sorts of routes for themselves.
Probably taking the less traveled route, where the less traffic is. That's what I do.
Yeah.
I have a question about whether or not many local bike shops are up to speed, so to speak, in terms of working on repairing, replacing parts on e-bikes, as they have been for decades and decades with conventional bikes. And I ask partly for general knowledge, and partly because I have a electric assist bike that needs attention, and I don't know where I can bring it.
Well, we work at the lending library with Todd at Cowbell Mobile Bike Shop, who you can Google. He has a van that he works out of, so he drives to you and works on your bike at your location. I also know that other times where the lending library has had you know, equipment malfunctions, Omar and Bob's has been able to help us, you know, immediately with stuff that they have in stock. So in terms of the learning curve, you know, how long does it take to catch up with the regular bike work that, as you said, they have been doing, I don't know how long. So that comparison I can't speak to, but I know that this is the direction, you know, this is the tide, where the tide is headed. And I think that the bike shops are capitalizing on that and selling a lot of e-bikes and equipment. So I can only imagine that they also have the repair capabilities. Hanover Adventure Tours, also a rental and e-bike seller, has reached out to offer their technical capabilities for repairing bikes to the lending library. So I can at least speak to those three that can help you.
Thanks.
I have a question for Anna. Did you have anything to do with the bikes that are part of a lending program at Springfield? Oh no, Edgar May Recreational Center here in Springfield?
I did not. I
Okay.
know that
There's
Local Motion has a model of, you know, creating kind of satellite lending libraries and then unloading it to local ownership. And that might have been what happened in Springfield. The ones that I'm aware of are Barry, Brattleboro, Rutland, and St. Johnsbury, I think, but
Okay.
could be the same.
I'll ask.
Very popular.
They're beautiful.
That is, yeah, that is the model they're going with there. I think they got some grant funding from VTrans to get it set up.
Really?
Yeah, so Local Motion's doing it, a lot of that work the first year or two, and then handing it off to the Edgar May Center. Yeah.
Oh, great.
Yeah, very
But
happy to
thank
have
you
that
for
member.
mentioning that, because I didn't know about that, and I will reach out to them to compare notes.
Great. Thanks.
They just started this fall, maybe even this month. I don't remember, but
Right.
yeah. And I know, I remember from talking to them, finding e-bike was a big, as Anna, you were mentioning. I think Omer and Bob's is where they ended up going, but yeah, sourcing it, and prices had gone up quite a bit too, I think. Those were, you know, challenges they faced.
Mhm.
Are there other questions from our attendees this evening?
I wonder.
Well, the presentation must be excellent, phenomenal. So, yeah, thank you guys so much for coming in. Is there anything else you'd like to add about e-bikes? I know this is it's a fairly new industry that's going to be coming, and we're seeing more and more of them on the road, including in Springfield where I live. I know we're starting to see more. We're starting to see a few of them, and it seems to be more and more.
And just thanks for having us. I mean, it's great getting to meet the folks in the TAC and hear a bit more about the work that you're doing. I mean, I'll just add that they're just a lot of fun. I think in adding to that e-cargo bikes, bikes that you can haul stuff around in. You know, I used to haul kiddos around, and it's a great, fun, active way to change habits of relying on a car. So it's great.
Yeah, freedom and fun are consistent words that come back when you look at people self-reporting what their experience is like. And my big hang up with e-bikes is that they are a puzzle piece that fits a lot of different problems. It's like having a key that fits so many different locks, from people who can't drive anymore and will never be able to people who want to leave their car at home for greenhouse gas emissions reasons. So I would say don't forget about the equity piece, and don't think about it only in terms of people replacing their cars with bikes, but also realize that these are really great solutions for people who can't afford a car or can't drive a car for other reasons. And yeah, thank you for having us.
Now that you just mentioned that last piece, and that triggered a question for me, is the expense of an e-bike. And probably as more and more manufacturers come online, are we seeing any decline in the purchase price yet, or is it remaining fairly stable because the market's not saturated?
I've seen it remain pretty stable or go up, you know, in terms of tracking a particular bike model from last year to this year. But there are affordable, reliable alternatives. Rad Power bikes are extremely popular. They're what we have used for the e-bike subsidies primary recommendation. And they have quite a range of bikes, including a bike that's a single speed bike that's meant to be a commuting bike that you would just use like on a college campus, going from building to building, sort of within a space. But that, you know, if they put it on sale, sometimes it's from $500 to $800, which is as cheap as you can get a bike or an e-bike. And the people who know much more about e-bikes than I do tell me that they're solid for, you know, ordering something that's not from a local bike shop.
Yeah, they're pricey.
Very good. One more time, does any of the attendees have any other questions? Oh, go ahead, Wayne.
Yeah.
Can they email the repair shop so that we can have it on our file? Email us the locations?
Sure. Yeah, I can do that to the emails that I received the Zoom invitation link from. I'll send it and I'll get to the right places.
Great.
Thank you.
And I'm actually going to log off if we're done with the e-bike portion.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you so much for coming this evening.
Have a great rest of your meeting.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, John.
Thank you.
You know?
Okay, team, that was a presentation that was based on a request from the TAC to learn more about e-bikes. As they are becoming more and more popular, we've got to be conscious and aware of it, and recognize that our roadways are meant to be shared, and